Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, your home for heavy strategy, awesome theme, and everything in between. Check us out along with other great podcasts at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 105, GenCon Reviews, Hot and Heavy Euros. Hey everybody, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is episode 105. With you once again is Anthony and Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
All right, we have a special guest with us this week, the Brandt from the Portal Gaming Podcast. Welcome.
Hello!
Welcome back to the show. You have not been a stranger on this show.
I have not.
You were on here with Ryan Lockett when Ryan Lockett was on the show, helping out with that interview.
Yeah, near and far, and I've got Amber Mines ready to be played, so...
There you go. Just you wait for Anthony on that.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
That was a troll, people.
Yeah. It's like, let it go, dot.
Anyway, you guys have been asking for this. This has been a little bit of a running joke for a bunch of episodes. We have cleared the deck. Anthony's going to talk about some heavy, well, medium to heavy, but Euros. Here come the Euros.
Yeah, for sure. This is the stuff, and there's a reason this is number 5 in the GenCon review series. These take longer to play and learn and then play again. And in some cases, to read the rule books. So,
yeah.
Took a while to get through these, and because we all know Jason's going to doze off a couple times, we brought in a special guest to help out.
That's right.
So it's not just me talking at you guys for 45 minutes.
That's right. I'm going to keep him awake over here because he's at my house, so I can poke him with a stick.
Nice.
So if you listen to last week's episode, at the end of it, I had Colin from the One Stop Co-op Shop on. He played Founders of Gloomhaven, and I think he fell asleep on the board. I think I'm in that boat over here, so I will try to participate. We'll see what happens over here. But no, I'm looking forward to it. There are definitely some Euros that I really like to play, and I want to see if, especially Founders, we'll save that one for last. We'll see if that one's worth it. But all these might have something for everybody. We'll see. But first, before we get started, before we hand the reins to Anthony and Brandt, we're going to throw it to Liz for the Kickstarter segment. Liz, what do you got for us this week?
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and once again, I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. Today, I want to talk about Lockup, a role-player tale. In this game, which is designed by Keith Mateka and set in the role-player universe, players will manage a gang of criminals who are working to amass power in prison, and by doing so, to earn the right to fight for their freedom in the Colosseum. Only the smartest and toughest prisoners have a shot at glory, and you will want those prisoners to be yours. Lockup is a worker placement game, but you'll need to bluff, manage resources, and play your cards well to earn the highest reputation for your crew. I'm personally a huge fan of roleplayer, and I'm very excited to try out this next game in the roleplayer universe. The game is $39, or $45 if you want the game, plus 6 extra cards. US shipping is included in the pledge. Happy gaming.
Was that a heavy Euro? I don't know, because in Liz we trust. We hope that it was a great project. Nice. Actually, knowing Liz, it probably wasn't a heavy Euro, but knowing the timing may have been Cloudspire. Maybe that's the chip theory game that's coming out soon. I'm not sure. Anyway, so hopefully that was a good project, and hopefully these are 4 good games we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about Newton. We're going to talk about Anthony. Hit me up with that pronunciation.
Coimbra.
Coimbra, there you go. You would think that with a Latin, I speak a little bit of Spanish, you would think that I would know how to pronounce that properly, but whatever. We're going to talk about Wendake, and we're going to talk about Founders of Gloomhaven last. So we're going to start with Newton. Newton was designed by Nestori Mangone and Simone Luciani, and published by my favorite publishers, Simon.
Yes, this is a Cranio Creations game. This was, they did Lorenzo Il Magnifico, which is, of course, Simon brought it to the States as well, so they seem to have a nice publishing relationship, which is cool. And it is one of my favorite designers right now. He does tend to work in design teams, but his name is on a lot of boxes I own. He was worked on Marco Polo, Lorenzo, Zolkin, a bunch of other stuff, Council of Four. So when
I've heard
this
of all
one
those
was,
games.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Council of Four.
They're real games.
Yeah, we're not making this up. Nestor Mangoni, however, is a little bit more of a newer designer. I think he has 3 or 4 credits, nothing you probably have heard of. So it's kind of an interesting design team. And I was excited immediately, not just because it's a new Euro from someone I really love the work of, but because it just had that look, that crunchy, lots of bits, cardboard look, even if it's coming from CMON. So the game, as it is, thematically, we always kind of glaze over this when we're talking about Euros, but it matters a little bit.
I'm not on the episode today, so we do not have to get into theme. It's okay.
People want to know. I mean, it's called Newton, so you are a scientist. Your job is to become a genius, to study and to become the next Newton. And you are in the age of reason. You were one of those scientists back in the day. So you'll be doing that in a lot of different ways. And this is kind of the theme of this whole episode. Going to try to stay super rules light. If you want to know the rules, go check out a video or something, but just kind of give you the essence of how the game plays, what it's like. Because if we just talked rules, this episode would be 2 hours long.
Please, I'm editing this thing, please.
And you wouldn't even know what we're talking about. You're like, cut. That's fine. But the basic idea of this game is you're playing cards. It is similar to several of the other games that he's worked on. And things are a little bit card-driven. And in this case, you have a hand of cards. You're going to play them face down one at a time on your personal board. They each have actions on them. And then the action strength is based on how many of those icons are visible on your board. And that's going to be upgraded over time because at the end of every round, you have to leave one of those cards. You tuck it under the board. So if you don't pick up new cards as you go, your deck gets smaller, but you will pick up new cards. There are 4 different places you'll be doing things. There's a map where you're moving your scientist around, leaving cubes in different places, universities, ancient sites. Some of these are bonuses. Some of them are requirements for other things you have to do. It's a little bit like Marco Polo. The work track is how you're going to generate income, or at least one of the ways you can generate income and unlock some special abilities. You have the knowledge tree. You have assistants that you can recruit. You start with 1, but you can get more over time. And then they're going to go off and learn different things on these different tracks. There's, I think, 4 tracks here that you can send people out on. And again, at the end, there's these bonuses that you can pick up. And then your personal library, which is on your personal board. And you will be taking books from your own pool and stacking them on the shelves of your library. If you complete a column or a row, you get a bonus point unlock, which is income every round. So it's important because you want to get those points every round. The game is interesting in a lot of ways because the mechanics are fairly simple. This is one of those Euros where the rule book is, 8-9 pages. It's not crazy long, but there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of stuff to look at. So you lay it all out on the table. You have all 4 of those places to go, dozens of different little bits. It looks a little fiddly, a lot of stuff going on. It's a little bit harder to teach because of that. So if you're playing this multiplayer, people tend to get bogged down. As is the case with a lot of Luciani games, people try to build an engine for one thing, maybe. You really kind of have to focus on at least 2, maybe 3 of the 4 things, but you can't do all of them, and you can't only do one of them. So people sometimes have issues with that. And then like I said, if you're ignoring the library track, you're probably going to lose, and most games like this, you want to think, oh, you could do any of the things, some combination thereof, but if there's an engine, if there's some way to generate points on a regular basis, round over round, you probably want to be doing that. And then the last note here, and this kind of relates to the solo, is there is 0 interaction in this game. I mean, there are bonus tokens on the board. Whoever gets there first gets them, but they're not hugely valuable. And then there are cards in the display that you could purchase as one of your actions, but there's a lot of them there. I've yet to reach a situation where someone was like, flip the table because you took a card I wanted. And that's not rare for a Euro to have no interaction. I just thought it was funny because when you get to the solo rules, it just says, play the game by yourself. There's no rule changes. It's just,
race against yourself on that track.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. So again, that's not a negative for me, but for some people it is. Again, I like this game quite a bit. I don't think it's quite as good as some of the other games in this bucket from this designer and the people he's worked with. Marco Polo's in my top 10. Lorenzo's a strong favorite from the last couple of years. Even Grand Austria Hotel, I really, really like. If you have limited space in your collection for this type of game, if you're only going to pick one, Luciani game, I don't necessarily think this would be it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. I still like it a lot. And compared to a lot of other Euros, I'd still put it higher in those tiers. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, so to me, this is like 6 tracks, a loop, and a tableau. The Euro game. Oh, and by the way, science!
Yeah.
Because it comes last. So I totally agree with you on the interaction. The only part that I think is interesting is the very first round. When you want to buy cards from the card tableau, it's like you got to get those cards to be able to upgrade. So the interaction is in the very beginning of the game. And then after that, because you were saying, nobody was really, most of the time I wasn't worried about people buying my cards. But in the very beginning, there's a limited number of cards that people can purchase. And if you want to upgrade your deck, right there's that initial buy of cards. But yeah, after that, like everybody can step on every tile. Like there's the bonus things, but you go left, I'll go right. Everybody's happy, right? In terms of that, it's interesting. The super thematic part is the work track, one of the tracks, which is literally you can spend actions and move up, and what do you get for working? Money.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's that straight and simple. So in terms of that, Anthony, you said a lot of the things that I was thinking. In terms of that, the books are crucial. So much so that I feel like when I'm teaching the game, I have to tell people to go for the books. Like you can't say like, oh, maybe you should do the books, or maybe you should do go for the books and then pick some other things to do.
Yeah. If you don't do the books, you're going to lose, because somebody gets even one row completed in that second round, then they're going to score those 4 or 5 points for 5 more rounds. Like, yeah, they're going to win now because you didn't do that thing.
So is that like a weakness? Like, because you say before about the true point salad, you didn't call that, but that's what it is. Like, multiple paths, doesn't really matter what you get. Like, the fact that it funnels you, is that like why you're not as enthusiastic about this as others?
I don't know. Yeah, like I was thinking about that before the recording. Like, why am I not as enthusiastic about this? Because I've had a lot of fun playing it every time, but at the same time, like I said, there are a lot of his other games that are higher than this. I think it's just, it feels a little looser. There's a lot of stuff going on. It doesn't really like you said, Brandt, like the theme is such an afterthought here. It's just a bunch of tracks and loops, and then you do things and they just happen to throw. It's science, so you don't really feel what you're doing so much, as you're just doing a lot of different mechanisms, and one of those mechanisms is more important than the others. And that's not to say, like, I don't want to say you can't win if you ignore that. I'm sure someone's pulled it off, and I had a game where one player was very stubborn about it and managed to come in. He didn't win, but he only lost by like maybe 10. So I don't know if that's impossible, but it certainly seems like a necessity.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that I think hinder the game a little bit. So the first one I think is a little bit minor, but I love the random setup. There's all these different shaped tokens, and you shuffle them and put them in the various areas. But it's neat that everything changes every time, but it makes some of the tracks kind of wonky. Like, I want to go up this track to collect this bonus, which is clearly early game. But this track, this bonus is clearly late game, so I don't want that. And then at the end of the tracks are the end game scoring, but because of that randomness, they don't align. Like, oh, this one I want to go to get the early, but I don't want to keep moving up in that track. Over here, I want to go to get this mid-game one, but the end game is not the strategy I've been doing. So, if it was preset, then all the tracks would just be, I know exactly where I'm going. But in this, it makes it like I only want to go partway up certain tracks, or the track that gives me end game points gives me no real benefit going up it during the game. So that part's a little bit strange to me. And then the other one that drove my wife insane, this is what she could not handle about the game, is it's like a limited engine build. So it'll tell you like, oh, now you can move 4 spaces around Europe, but you have to stop on a tile in order to put a token there and like collect its benefit. So it'll say, you can now move 4 spaces, but you really only want to move 2. So you built this engine to move 4, but 4 doesn't help you. And that happened in a bunch of the tracks, like where it's like, well, I have this engine going, but it's not really, like I have to halt it.
That does happen with several of the things, right? Because it has a thing like Marco Polo, right? If you run straight through it, nothing happens. You don't get the bonus. And same thing with like the card draw or anything else. You're like, well, I don't really have a reason to draw 4 cards right now, but look at my engine. So
yeah. Right. Yeah, but I mean, just something like Terraforming Mars for an engine build, like that just wants you to go as far down the rabbit hole as you can, and it never limits you, and that's the fun of that type of engine build. Mm-hmm. So this one doesn't really seem to benefit. You're just kind of, oh, I gained an unnecessary bonus now, and that just, I don't know, that frustrated, to figure out. And then you also said that balance, that like point salad balance or the track, which one I want to go through, is a little tricky.
Yeah, this is definitely an efficiency engine. Like, it's not like just build the biggest thing you can and blow everybody away. It's like very carefully balance which of the things you do and don't go too far in any one direction, because if you do, you're wasting energy and possibly, putting yourself in a bad place. I've seen people end up in bad places a couple times in this, and that's never a great sign. But at the same time, I like efficiency engine type games, so it's just a matter of like teaching it well.
Okay, so that was Newton. Funny because I talked about the 3 games that we laid out, and then Brandt, if you guys don't, Brandt has only been on the show a couple times. His kitchen is crazy. There's games all over the place. I showed this game room to my wife, and she just looked at me and goes, "No, just don't do that." And so he had this other game, Coimbra, laid out. And he's like, if you ask me to play either of these 2 games, you're playing Coimbra every single time. So we're like, you know what? Let's just throw it in on the episode and talk about it. So now we're going to talk about Coimbra, which Anthony has played. This was designed by Virginio Gili and Flaminia Brasisi, published by Egert Spila. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, so in Coimbra, you are in Portugal. And I'm not sure of the theme exactly here, but you're trying to build up your kingdom, your sect, your whatever.
Just stop with the theme talk, guys. I know it's fine.
But the basic mechanic is every round there's 12 cards laid out to be drafted, and then you roll a set of dice, and there's colored dice. And each player then goes about drafting the dice. And the interesting part is the draft is almost like a double draft. So you're trying to draft a die for its number and for its color, which produce separate actions. You then, when you draft a die, you kind of worker placement in a spot, but that also becomes like a little auction. So whoever has the highest die number in 3 out of the 4 will get to choose first as to which card they want. But since they're the highest number, they also have to pay that amount. And there's 2 resources. I believe it's guards and coins are the 2 resources that you're using, and you have to pay one or the other, whatever the cards say. There's another spot where you can buy a bunch of upgrades, and that goes from low to high, and you get them by putting your dice there. And so you're drafting these cards, and you're just building this engine, and you move up these 4 tracks that are associated with gaining guards and gaining coins and moving around the map of Portugal and just straight up victory points, right? No hiding it.
So that's where the link came. So it's like tracks and cards and moving up the tracks. Right. That's where the mental link came. How does this game get a move ahead of Newton, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's faster than Newton. The decisions, I think, are much deeper, that drafting decision. So even though the game itself, I think, is lighter, the decisions for what dice I want to draft, because you can just say, okay, I'm going to draft all gray dice this game, and I'm just going to go for that strategy. And it could work, but it could also work to draft different dice. And so you've got to play that out, and that die roll gets completely mitigated by the idea that you're drafting, which is wonderful, because now we're rolling dice, and then we're using them as a team. No. Not as a team, but we're working with them all together. So I really like this game. The engine build, this game is asking you, it's begging you to try to, find 2 tracks that you can just push home and move all around and figure out how you can kind of best your opponents. But everybody is scoring a bunch of points. So it's like, who can score the most of a bunch of points? Not just one person loops way ahead. So, that's kind of the short of that. But Coimbra, I find wonderful.
Yeah, this game is fantastic. It's funny because these were the 2 Euros of my summer cons. Like, Coimbra was Origins and Newton was GenCon, and Coimbra definitely seems to have staying power, whereas Newton not so much, at least especially in my group where people still want to play it. I really, really enjoyed it. I agree. I really like how short it is. And it's not a short game, but if you're talking to Euro gamers, it's relatively short. You can get it in 90 minutes or less.
Breezy 90 minutes.
Breezy 90 minutes, man. Newton is 2 to 3 hours easy. So, it's definitely a good bit faster. It's much more streamlined. It's easier to teach. And that interaction at the beginning of every round is just fantastic. Like, it's agonizing as people think through everything and where you want to go. And, oh, what if I do this? But then that person could jump ahead and do this. And I really don't want to spend that much to get this card, but I really need to make sure I get this card. It's really, really cool. And the funny part is that part of the game is probably 60 or 70% of it, because once everybody's drafted and chosen their cards and paid for them, all the other stuff that happens is just like, maintenance. And it's still fun because you're building up stuff and, growing your engine, but it kind of flows pretty quickly. My only major issue with this game was card variety. You use every single card every time you play. And there are a handful of cards that have a take that element that doesn't seem to fit the game, or at least the feel that I get from the game, because there aren't that many of them. So they really are only going to benefit one or two people. It's not like anybody could grab it and hurt everybody else. It's the person who happened to move up high enough on the orange track to mess everybody else up who's behind them. So I'm not a huge fan of that, but I feel like that could be addressed with an expansion. Just throw some more cards in.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the couple games that I play where that's been a major issue. It's been the other players talking about who's going to outbid that person to take that card for minimum benefit, but to keep them from, which is just interesting in a Euro game to have that suddenly happen, and sometimes it just happens by default. So it's kind of interesting on that front. But yeah, I always say that the best take that mechanisms in a Euro game, or I don't know if it's take that, but whatever, are timing. That timing, the worker placement where I go to the space just before you were going to go there, or the dice drafting where I grab the die just before you, and this game just has that in spades.
Or you fire off the combo, one turn before.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't feel like this game needed a card that, takes away someone's purple cards.
Yeah.
That's just, it's brutal. It's tough, especially when you've spent actions to get it. But at the same time, maybe it's a balancing issue that I just haven't seen. Everything else, though, about this, absolutely love it. It's a beautiful game to look at. Very much looking forward to whatever expansions they put out for it.
Yep.
Is it available in the United States?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's Plan B games.
I know. But I don't know that I've seen it in retail. And, of course, my podcast is for a store.
Oh, yeah.
And we haven't had it come in yet. So I've been a little confused as to where that is. But I know Reef is also not out in retail yet, interestingly enough. So hopefully it's just a Plan B getting everything together and shipped out.
Yeah. I mean, they've just got bogged down printing copies of Azul.
That's right. Giant Azul.
Yeah. We sometimes get user feedback about I just heard about this great game. Can I get it? No.
Yeah.
It'll be very soon. It's very soon.
So hopefully, this is gettable at least in a pre-order or something. I'm actually interested. You guys sold me on it. I will. I'd like to. Anthony does this every once in a while. Every heavy episode, he'll give me one that's okay, I'll play this. Anachrony was the last one, and now Coimbra. So thank you. You're expanding my horizons as usual, my man.
Yeah, I think this could be one you like. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, of the four we're talking about tonight, it's definitely the one I would
definitely of the four, for sure.
All right, so that was Coimbra from as the aforementioned Eggert Spiele and Plan B Games. Let's get, I think this game's a little bit heavier. Wendake?
It's definitely got more bits.
Okay, there you go. It's physically heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I lifted it up to see who designed it and everything. I'm like, wow, this is a little bit much. Anyway, so this is Wendake, designed by Danilo Sabia, published by Placentia Games, I believe in the EU, brought over to the US by Renegade Games.
Yeah, definitely. So, and this is I believe a first-time designer, and this game was on Kickstarter at some point. So it's been around for a little bit, just now released in the US at the cons. And so just now getting a chance to play it in English. This, as we said, it's a very heavy box. And you open it up, and there are so many bits. So many bits. And I don't know that it's necessarily a fiddly game. I guess we can come back to that. But there's just a lot going on here. So again, kind of a very high-level overview of how this game plays.
I think what was it? I think it was Clans of Caledonia had all the bits last time. Is that kind of what we're talking here?
Yeah, maybe along those lines. I mean, it takes up a lot of space, and everything's kind of segmented and modular. So I think that's a part of it too. There's just cardboard everywhere. But it kind of works. Sometimes you get that, and you're just I can't keep track of everything I'm looking at on the table. In this case, it all kind of comes together. So your mileage may vary. Thematically, and I'm going to keep doing that because, I have to grind it in.
What a troll! How dare you?
Hey, this is the most thematic of the 4 games.
It is. I think this one, it's important. So this is a game about the Huron Nation, the Native American tribes living near the Great Lakes, and it specifically takes place during the 7 Years' War between the French and the English in the 18th century. So the game, and I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to say it's accurate, but it does make a lot of attempts and overtures to show you this is what the history was. This is how the natives in the area lived. There's no teepees or any of that. It's very clear about the tribes it's talking about and tries to get the culture of it right. Unlike
if it was inaccurate, then we would have heard.
Right? Yeah, there's a game up on BGG right now. It's coming out at Essen called Manitoba, and people are ripping that one apart. So
not accurate, that game. This
not
one sounds
accurate
like
at all.
Better job.
Yeah. So the game is about you are trying to become a chief of one of these tribes, and the game is really just about the lifestyles and how people lived in this time and space. So how that works is you can have multiple tracks that you're moving points on: economic, military, ritual, and mask. And you do this through many, many possible actions. And the way the action grid works is you have your own personal board, and you have 9 tiles. You put the 9 tiles into the board. It's got an inset in it, and it's modular. So the only one that has to go in a certain spot is the campfire. It goes in the middle, and then everything else you just put down randomly. These 8 specific actions are just what you start the game with. Every round, you're going to turn one in and get a new one from a display that people can draft out of. The actions there's a lot of them. You can move. You can add people to the map. You can put canoes out. You can hunt for things. You can convert the pelts you hunted. You get fish. You get mask cards. You can complete these little tortoise things that give you extra points based on how many people you have on the map. You can fight each other. You can duplicate other actions. You can trade goods. It's a lot of stuff you can do. And the cool thing is as you upgrade your tiles, so when you start the game, most of these tiles have 1, maybe 2 actions on them. As you upgrade them, you're going to get tiles that have 2, sometimes 3 actions on them. So you're getting to take more actions. And this takes place over the course of 7 game rounds. So you get to do that 3 times per round over the course of 7. So there are dudes on the map. They don't really do much. It's really just they kind of represent your income when you trigger your income. But there is that interaction. If people move their figures into the same space as each other, they can fight if they choose to. It is deterministic where you just I have 1, you have 2, we both remove 1. Now I have 1. Woo! But it's kind of that Euro style of just balancing resources out and saying all right, I really need to take that space over for this particular, thing I'm trying to do. So I'm going to move 2 guys in there so I can knock his 1 out. So it is not particularly interesting if you're looking for combat, but it is interaction, a lot more than you see in most of these types of games. The scoring is pretty interesting too. You have the modular tracks and then the 4 different things you're scoring, like I mentioned. So at the beginning of the game, you put them out randomly, and you're going to have 2 pairs of 2. So you might have the masks and the economic on one track, and then the military and the ritual on the other track. And what you do is you take the lowest score from each of the pairs and add them together. So you want to diversify as much as possible. This is another game, again, another efficiency engine where you don't want to just ramp one thing home, because if you get 25 points on one and 12 points on the other, you got 12 points. So the 25 doesn't do you any good. So it's definitely a game to try to balance out. And it's the type of game you want to play a few times before you wrap your head around it. So, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this. I think I only really have a couple of complaints, and they're not really about the game itself. It's more about the setup and the management of everything. Brant, you played this too, right?
Yeah, so this action selections mechanic or system or whatever is amazing. It's just simply amazing. It's innovative. It's so good. And what I love about it is it's that natural engine build. You don't do anything. The game just, by doing the game, you build an engine. And I like that because, I was talking about a game from earlier this year. Castell does the same thing. Your engine just gets better as the game goes on. And so you just have more interesting things to do and more stuff. So that somebody needs to take that action selection system and keep putting it in other games.
So you don't like screw it up. So like you have those games where if you, let's say you're kind of new and you miss your boat a little bit early, you're just kind of crapped out.
No,
so that's not happening.
Because you just get a better tile, and then you get a better tile, and then you get a better tile, and then I think it's round 4 or 5. Then you get the next set of even better tiles and better. So you just keep taking better tiles, unless you got rid of a good tile to get. I don't know. You can't. So it's very good. It's very well done. I wrote down here for my notes that like it had a brutal scoring system. I don't think that's the right term because brutal sounds like it's like difficult. It's just like you were saying. There's so much balance that you have to wrap your head around. I'm trying to balance. So when you're taking new action tiles, you need to purposely take something you don't have to make sure that you balance that out. But that's definitely what makes the game interesting. The whole resource management is figuring that out. The board management, it's funny, it's one of these games where the board is a majority of the game, the size of the game, the table space, but it's not super interesting. You're just taking spaces to put people there to farm or gather, and it's there. And it's totally fine, and it totally makes sense, and it doesn't need it because the action selection is so good, but it'd be neat to see something a little more robust. And then, I don't know if you mentioned player powers, but to me, they're a must. There's no reason to not use the player. By the time you're playing a game this heavy, just throw in player powers. Like, the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you start the game with one, and then as you go through the game, you're going to pick up the progress tiles as you go, and then you get more powers that you can activate on each of your turns. So it's not even just the actions you're taking. It's you're building a tableau of cool stuff to do over the course of the game.
Yeah, and then you had said the theme was important to mention. I totally think like this is a great, unique theme that seems to be on par, as far as we know. Again, I'm not a history buff either, but it's just awesome to see a theme like this coming out. So,
since the theme's important, I kind of missed that. Like, what are you doing theme-wise? Like, what are the Huron doing? Was it one of those things where it's like there's cool style? We talked about that with the theme episode, and you just kind of feel like you're in this thing, or is there like a propulsion, like you're trading or you're building something or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think there's a few things. I mean, the core of the game is that you are living, and it's trying to replicate that idea of like you are farming, and which involves spreading out your influence and getting your various pieces to different spaces and then generating those goods. But you're also, developing new, stories and gathering those mask cards that you can complete different rituals. There's the one mechanism in particular that really struck me is it's kind of rough, but when you're trading, you can choose during the trade action to trade with the white people. And this is the only time the white people come up in this game. But when you do, you have to flip over a mask card. And if it has a skull on it, they traded you smallpox and you have to kill one of your people. So it's kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
All right. Smallpox is not just a little Euro thing.
But it's based on a historical event where they were doing that. They were purposely trading the Native Americans blankets that were infected with smallpox to hurt them, which is unbelievably wretched,
But true to history and in the game,
history,
and represented well. Like there's that thing with Manitoba. If people don't know, Manitoba is this game that is supposed to be representing the Cree Nation, but it's a game about building a totem pole. The Cree didn't have totem poles, so like people are like, so I think one person kind of got on it, wrote this whole thing about how it misrepresented the culture, and then a lot of people just kind of jumped in after the fact and, representation, everything. And, there's that backlash. It's like, okay, what can we include in the game? People went crazy for the slave cards in 5 Tribes. People went crazy for this, that, and the other thing. And the answer to that question is you can include anything you want, but make it fit. Make it like historical and make it say something. Make it part of the game and part in a way that respects what actually happened. Sounds like this game kind of pulled off that trick.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a very good game. I agree with Brandt that the action selection, the way that works, it's just fantastic. I wish I saw it more. And the cool thing is, like, when you take an action, you flip the tile over, but then they kind of slide down. So you can't take the same action twice unless it's in your bottom row. And they have to be in a row or column or diagonal. So you can't just pick 3 random ones in your little tableau. You have to match them up. So you're thinking, like, which row or column or diagonal do I want to take? So you have to pair things together. It really, really forces you to think, but it also boxes you in just enough that you don't get too much AP. My only major issue with the game is how long it takes to set up.
Yep. If you don't like setting up games, run.
Yeah. And I don't even mind for like multiplayer because it's a couple hour game. So if it takes 30 minutes to set up, you can teach while you go. It's not the end of the world. It's, it's no worse than like a Caverna. It's, if I wanted to play it solo, I did it once and I enjoyed it, but I haven't got myself to pull it back out because I'm like, I don't want to set this up for half an hour to play it for 40 minutes, It's a little rough.
Yeah, well, I thought the game was excellent. I mean, on the scale there, it's a buy to me, as long as you know you're getting into a heavy Euro, But that action selection mechanism was like, I'm waking up the next morning thinking about it, which is always a great sign of a heavy Euro. Yeah,
absolutely. This is definitely one I'm keeping.
There may be a chance that I'll play this. We'll see. There's a long list of games. The heaviness, like I said, the heaviness does not throw me off. It's just a lack of theme. If there's something's going to have a theme, Through the Age is one of my favorite games. I have a bunch of other, like a small group of Euros that I love. Maybe I'll give this one a try. So thank you guys for evangelizing. You guys are doing a real good job making me want to buy these games.
Nice.
Speaking of buying games, speaking of, being part of the hotness and all that kind of stuff, this game, we saved it for last. A lot of people are curious about it, so we definitely wanted to make sure it was on the slate. And they're curious about it because of one word, Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is in the title, but this game has nothing to do mechanically with the beast that we know that is Gloomhaven. So this is Founders of Gloomhaven, designed by our friend Isaac Childress, multiple-time guest of the show, published by Cephalofair Games. Let's hear about it. Let's hear if Founders of Gloomhaven is something that a Gloomhaven fan or anybody into this stuff should take a look at.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a Euro. This is not like Gloomhaven at all. So obviously we are talking about a different type of game. Yes, it is a Euro. And obviously, I mean, it fits on this episode. It's fine. But like, I feel like still people are getting confused about this. And, Isaac's done a lot to try to make sure people know it's a Euro. His first game was a Euro too. So Gloomhaven's the weird one, right?
Yeah. If you guys didn't listen to the fantasy designer thing, I put out a question to Isaac Childress, Frank West, and Tristan Hall, what is a game you admire? And, they were talking about like these big thematic things. And Isaac was like, what's the next Lacerta?
Yeah.
That's Isaac. Like, Gloomhaven is the anomaly. He likes this other stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a Euro-y game too. So yeah, this is Founders of Gloomhaven, and the name Gloomhaven is a bit of a misnomer. Like Jason said, there's really nothing in this game other than kind of a vague connection to the theme and the different races from Gloomhaven. There are several of them in this game that tie it together. This takes place hundreds, I can't remember exactly how many years before, maybe 1,000 years before the events of Gloomhaven. So you are building the city. So it doesn't even exist yet. I think the only connection between this and that is there are like 9 cards that come in the box that you can use to like insert a single card into your Gloomhaven game with its hundreds of cards. So not even really a thematic link. The game itself. So the thing that kind of jumped out at me at first is that mechanically it's a little similar to Concordia. You have a hand of cards. You start the game with 5, and you're going to play them one at a time on your turn. And then there's a card in your hand that allows you to pull those cards back. Has a couple more mechanisms thrown on top of it. Obviously, this game is not just like a rehash of Concordia, but it just reminded me a little bit of that with kind of, Isaac's own spin on it. And you're going to buy new cards and build up your deck. So it's got a little bit of that deck building element to it. You can't reuse a card multiple times until you've called them back. There are different things that happen when you do that. It also has a following mechanism. So when you play a card, the action you take is a little bit better, but everybody else can follow that action and kind of utilize those additional actions. So you can see the Lacerda influence there as well. That's something Lacerda does a lot, is the follow actions. And there's a lot to that. So it's not, of all the games we're talking about, I think it's the hardest one to kind of delve into and pull apart and talk about like how it actually plays. But at the core, you have resources. Everybody's going to start the game with these two types of resources you can produce, buildings you can put out, and you are trying to use those resources to build bigger buildings and eventually to generate points. But nobody can access all of them. So you kind of have to work together to a certain degree. And get them close enough to each other so that you can play out these larger buildings that require these different types of resources to be together. So, and of course, there are polyominoes to represent all these different buildings. So that's
polyominoes. You're in, right?
Yeah. There's a level 2 buildings and the level 3 buildings, and they get bigger as you go. And then there's the prestige buildings, which are how you're going to generate points for the most part. And like I said, you have to work together to get all this stuff out. You can't really build anything on your own, with a couple of exceptions if you get lucky. There are always going to be some resources that nobody's playing in the game. So these are things that you can import and get a building of and put on the board somewhere. So you can get upwards of 4 resources in the game, but you can't get all of them. You can't get all the top level stuff. So you got to work with other people. And that's kind of the core of the game. There are roads you can build to kind of connect things. There are different ways you can play and pull points. When you score things, you're going to divvy up points based on whose resources you're using. So if you build a bigger building and are scoring it, but you use someone else's resource as one of the resources needed to build that building, they're going to get some of those points. So you're never really doing anything just for yourself, but you want to win still. So you're kind of managing that and making sure that you get more than other people, I guess. But you're also setting yourself up in different ways to benefit when other people take actions. It kind of reminded me of a Martin Wallace game a little bit in that way, and that you're building stuff, but other people can use it. But that's okay because you score when they do. The vote mechanism is interesting. So when you play your vote card, which is how you pull all your cards back into your hand, it lets you, it's going to call a vote. People can use the influence they've been building up to vote on which of these different building proposals they want to go into effect. And these can do all sorts of different things to the game. There's other stuff. I mean, this game it's not the heaviest game necessarily that I've ever played. I don't even know if it's the heaviest game on this list. It's up there. But
what is the heaviest game you've ever played? I'm curious about that.
I don't even know.
And I put you on the spot right there.
Right?
I think mine's
Arkwright.
Arkwright.
I
think is the heaviest game I've played. I'm not sure. I played 1846, but I think in terms of 18XX, that's not the heaviest.
I think Arkwright probably, or maybe PAX Renaissance. I think
the PAX games, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just curious.
You're going to get us talking about some really dry stuff if you go down that road.
Founders, go back to Founders. Sorry.
I've also painted a 40-foot wall.
Okay.
And then I watched it dry. So yeah, this is it has a lot going along those lines. I think the thing that's pushed a lot of people away, like if you look at the reviews, they're not glowing, and you look at the rating on BGG, and it's a little bit lower than you might expect for the next game from the number 1 of all time game. Part of that, I think, is the rule book, which is real bad. It's just not good. It was tough to get through. Read it multiple times. It's not clear on a lot of things. So that's an issue. The game's a little bit fiddly. There's lots of bits trying to figure out what everything does. There's a lot of weird edge cases with some of the rules too. It's very specific about where you can put things, how you put them there. Like your stuff can never touch your stuff, which is a simple enough rule, but then there's all these weird little things that kind of break that rule. The difference between ownership of a resource versus access to a resource. All this little things kind of get in your head. Once they're in your head, it's not that complicated, but you got to get them there, which does make it a little harder to teach. Graphic design is not particularly inspired. It's a little bland. The player boards are nice because you have the race artwork, which is nice, but the board itself is very, very brown. Lots and lots of brown, like Gloomhaven. So, but the core gameplay, the game itself, the mechanisms, the things you're doing, and the system you're building up is a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it. It's very enjoyable. The solo play is also a lot of fun because you're trying to unravel this puzzle and get all this stuff out there and meet the specific expectations of the game in the number of rounds that you have. But I think there are definitely more barriers to entry with this game than I'd like to see for this weight.
Yeah, so Gloomhaven is my number 1 game of all time. And
whoa! I didn't know that.
And Kathy and I have now played 50 scenarios of Gloomhaven.
Holy moly!
Nice.
So much so, she built our own custom insert for Gloomhaven to negate the one problem with Gloomhaven, which is setup time. And so we now have a 7-minute setup time on Gloomhaven, which is wonderful.
It's good.
So in terms of that, I love Gloomhaven. And yeah, Founders of Gloomhaven is just totally a different brainchild with that name tacked on there. It's somewhat interesting having played those, be like, oh, that's that building that we went to before we got this quest, or oh, it's that race that I've played a character of that. So there's that minimal interest in terms of all that. At risk of sounding arrogant, I feel like I'm an excellent teacher of games. And
you are a professional teacher, so
that's true.
Yeah.
And I pretty much have yet to teach a game of this where I didn't miss a pretty major rule.
Yeah.
The first time I taught it, I missed several, so much so we just decided to stop playing. The next time, I thought I was doing well till I hit a barrier, and the last time, all the way to the end, and suddenly at the end, we realized there was a rule. So that's been a little bit tough. I believe when I solo played, I did not miss any rules. However, it takes away, like, you own all the resources. So in the regular game, they divvy up all the resources, and in solo play, you just own them all. So you miss learning some of those key rules. The rulebook's tough, and the best part about this game, by far, is the interaction is unbelievable. It's so high-level interaction for a Euro, but that's its biggest undoing. It's so interactive that if you miss a rule, and that rulebook is tough, you can't go back. So you're just stuck. Because so many things have happened. I did this because you did that, and then I gained this benefit, and you can't go back with those rules. So you kind of have to decide, as you're learning it. Like you said, that barrier of entry is huge, and unlike a Race for the Galaxy, which is a well-known barrier to entry, the game is just a lot longer and meatier than that. So you can't just shuffle up and start over again. But yeah, the interaction is awesome. That card play is pretty fun. Gaining new cards, like you just always feel like you have a wealth of possibilities. For me, the toughest part with reviewing this game has been I've yet to play a 3 or 4 player game. And at 2, each time I've played... Well, sorry, I did play a 4 player that we had to end. Because we got so many rules wrong. At 2, both times, there was just one... Like, I wouldn't call the game cutthroat, but at some point, it's extremely cutthroat. Like, whoever builds that resource will win the game. And when they built that resource, it was like a cascading effect of points... and points upon points, and that person would take like a 30 to 40 point lead and then just try to get the game to end while the other person's trying to catch up. And both times the person behind did manage to close the gap, but not more than like 10 or 15 points. So I would absolutely love to play this game at 3 or 4. Of the games we talked about, this game has the best potential to me when I get a chance to play it at 3 and 4. Whereas the other games, I kind of know where they stand at. Mm-hmm. This one, I'm still hopeful of the increase in interest at a 3 and 4 player game.
Yeah. I mean, this is a funny game because the first time I played, I had a similar experience to you where like we messed up enough rules, and there's a guy in my game group who will always sit there with the rule book and just kind of go through it as we're playing, which is fun.
Sigh.
I love it when that guy is not the rules teacher. Just that guy just like flies in, backseat teaching. It's great.
Yeah. Well, he knows that I miss rules occasionally because I learn 3 or 4 new games a week. And so he's like, oh, I'll just check this. And sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's annoying. But, in the end, with this game in particular, even he was like, I don't know what this means. We messed this up. And, we finished it, but I don't think anybody was super happy with it. But on the 3rd or 4th play, I feel like we had it down. I don't know that we made a lot of mistakes. Everybody had a good time. The game was really fun and incredibly satisfying. But it took a long time to get there. So It's a tough game. It reminds me of Feudum a little bit, where the barrier of entry is so high, and you have to fight through multiple plays to get there, and you have to get it with a group who you're not teaching anymore. And then when you finally get to that point, you're like, wow, this is really good. That was a lot of work. Is it worth it? It's really going to depend on your group and how often you play these kind of games.
Yeah, imagine that, put that into a video game perspective. So you just said on the 3rd or 4th play, and this is a 2 to 3 hour game, right? So you're saying, so after 7 hours, I think we were in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
No video game player that I know of these days is going to get 7 hours into a game before they feel like they understand the video game. And maybe I'm making a stereotype there, but
or a book, like you're gonna read a book until like chapter 7,
right?
It's like, oh, this turned around now. It's like, okay, that was a long way coming.
So that's definitely an issue to know. But like, I like the challenge of learning a game, so that's okay with me. And it was different groups I played with each time, so they only had to kind of suffer through me figuring it out once each. So that's where that one is. But it's a play to me in terms of that.
Yeah, me too. I think. And honestly, like every time I played it, I liked it a little bit more. I think eventually I might get to the point where I'm like, I love this, but I still don't know if I'd recommend it. Based on what we said, you know who you are. Like if you're the type of person who's going to delve in and you're like, whatever, rules, problems, whatever, I'll figure it out. The game is good, but you got to get there first.
Yeah, and it's a little more splatter and a little less Uwe, right? Like in the spectrum of heavy Euros.
Those are good words. Those are awesome words. I know what that is. Come on. Okay, so that was 4 hot and heavy Euros served hot and fresh for you guys. We hope you enjoyed that. Brandt, thank you very much for jumping on that grenade and pitching in, helping Anthony not talk to himself for an hour.
Oh, it was fun. Thank you very much.
Oh, much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. These are great games, right? You look at 2018 and you say these 4 games came out and you're a heavy Euro gamer. Like, you got 4 great games to play.
I mean, what else we got? Castell's sitting here. You guys like that?
So good.
I'm sure there's more, We're about to talk about probably next week. We're going to talk about probably the game of the year, which is not a light game. We'll be talking a whole episode on Root, so we're looking forward to that.
Nice.
Absolutely. All right. So yes, heavy games. We did it. And just a few weeks before Essen, so maybe we can do it again by the end of the year. I don't know. We'll see what we do.
We got a Phil Eklund episode on the tap, don't we?
Oh my gosh, I got to get caught up on those.
I'm really running the other way for that.
Yeah, you might actually fall asleep for that one, dude. But that's everything for this week, guys. So if you love any of these games, if you have any thoughts, opinions, questions, or if there's other games like these that you'd like to hear us talk about that we have not yet talked about, we don't do heavy games too often. We tend to cluster them together. So let us know if you think we missed something. That's going to go ahead and be everything for this week. So until next time, go ahead and grab a game off the shelf and let's make every night game night.
Later, everybody.
Ciao.